Joshua ben Joseph, Rebellious House of Israel. Medieval and classical religious music presents an embarrassment of riches, much appreciated even by my heathenish ears. Generally speaking, modern religious songs have few of the riches and all of the embarrassment. So, here's the first reason why Joshua ben Joseph's songs are different. They absolutely refuse to give God an easy time. All things are not bright and beautiful. The songs are closely faithful to biblical text, which means God seems distinctly and dangerously unbalanced. So, forget the good news from the hippie pastors whose kumbayaing probably does convert droves of atheists to suicidal Cthulhu cultists. Instead, Rebellious House of Israel focuses on the Old Testament prophets. Don't expect a proto-Christian love-in saying, look, we've got things in common, it's just God the Father, same thing. No, it's not that kind of continuity Judaism, not at all. And let's face it, despite some absolute glories achieved with the help of William Blake, most Christian hymnody is Sunday school awful. Islam largely avoided sonic embarrassment due to fatwas which range all the way from music being mainly forbidden to music being totally forbidden. But between the perpetually chart-topping call to prayer and the Jesus-loving tambourine-shaking classes, there is a lot of dross. Jewish song seems different. Not that it doesn't contain its own percentages of total rubbish, but perhaps because Jews aren't commanded to recruit others to their dogmas and myths. I think that's important. The New Testament and the Quran have no songs, none. But the songs of David and the songs of Solomon are first and foremost songs. And Solomon's is an erotic song at that. The Jews had external pressures about how they appeared to people outside the religion, but they had no internal pressures about the nature of the songs. No worries about critics, no need to downplay it, to cool it off or angle anything. In contrast, Christians have spent centuries squirming and blushing about the jealous sexuality and irrational violence of Jesus' dad, while those damned venal Jews joyfully celebrate it. This collection of songs by JBJ is an exploration of that divine violence and jealousy, full of ambiguities, baffled by God's variable wrath, and partly an accusation of that God, and also a slightly mad celebration.
Behold the butchered Balaam gangs, burn like sacrificial bulls. God's vengeance like a vulture hangs, high up above the place of skulls.
Joshua ben Joseph is Jewish-Irish, from what used to be called the working class. This gives him all sorts of privileges in the field of tribulation research. He's had rejections, exclusions and physical beatings which masochists could only dream of. Like many poets and musicians, he's beat himself up about all of that too, pretty mercilessly from what I can tell. Now, suffering does not improve people, but if the brain injuries are manageable, it sometimes makes them more profound. Suffering makes us think and revalue our feelings. It forces creativity. The tragedy is that we learn almost nothing from pleasure.
We have seen the darkness on the face of the deep.
I'm no longer suspicious of religions because all my suspicions have been sufficiently confirmed. Religions are very largely control mechanisms, scams and power grabs. But I have a strong sense of the sacred as a counterforce to religion, a counterforce to piety. Religion aims at containing and metering out the sacred in homeopathic doses, reining in the contagion of sex and death and sacrifice within hidebound rituals. So even though Joshua Ben Joseph's songs are based very firmly in religious texts, I hear them as sacred songs. And sacred song means something very different from religious songs, though they do sometimes overlap.
And while the sated harlot sleeps, the city like a widow weeps. Come back to me, Hosea.
What strikes me as admirable and crucial to these songs is the honesty about the old God. Many Jewish songwriters compromise Yahweh by dilution in Christian ideas. Mendelssohn's Hear My Prayer suggests we can petition a hidden but essentially kindly God. It's as saccharine as Eli Jenkins's God in Under Milk Wood, to whom he prays, Thou I know shall be the first to see our best side, not our worst. Let's get this straight. That's not the God of the Old Testament prophets, no way. To be of Israel means fighting with God. And as Joshua Ben Joseph sings loud and clear, fighting with God is in some ways preposterously easy. Because Yahweh will beat you to a pulp if you look sideways at another deity. It's not hard to get a fight.
I condemn thee to a cuckold's life, as thou cuckolded me. Sometimes a man must beat his wife, as I must beat thee. Hosea.
In other ways, the Jewish struggle with God is impossible because this isn't just an abusive spouse you could stab while they slept. You can't opt out, divorce, you can't escape ever. That's the covenant, the eternal wedding dance of Yahweh and Israel. It involves smiting. On a good day, it's your enemies smitten and smote. But it's an unstable marriage, and on bad days, who's the nearest punchbag? Look at the book of Numbers. Yahweh kills 250 people for complaining about lack of water. 250 Jewish people plus their families dead. Some others thought this was a bit harsh and complained about the killings. God says, "Stand back, Moses, I will destroy them." And Moses, no human shield routine, no haggling, just stands back and boom, another 14,000 dead Jews. The songs in this collection don't try to make Yahweh sound any better than the book of Numbers or I just did. They tell it straight. If you're dealing with the old God, you're dealing with something inhuman, an unimaginable power, a whirlwind with questions but no explanations. Atheists often call this God a psychopath, but that's too anthropomorphic. Speaking as a non-Jew, what smites me as the most distinctive thing about the old God, from the human point of view, the only point of view we have, is that this God is incomprehensible. But also in a mad way, admirable in his distance from the saccharine great pal in the sky or dear daddy of Christianity. Joshua Ben Joseph's account of the God of the prophets is in many ways closer to the pagan hilltop gods of lightning and weapons, Thor, Ares, or the ancient Aztec solar and sacrificial nutcases.
'Tis fight hiding in the wild wood, all made of flames and flesh and blood. He who has not wine nor crust, let him live on rain and dust. O Lord, look kindly on your servant below, Lord of famine, Lord of flood, who sends the ravens to and fro to feed Elijah in the wild wood.
And this is the source of these songs' power. Their refusal to compromise, even in matters which seem ugly, incomprehensible, or suggestive of an evil streak a mile wide in the God of the Jews. One of the main strands of the message seems to be, if you're not Jewish, this is not your God, and you really should thank your God or pantheon or godless universe for that fact. I know that Joshua had to fight for a lot of the content and lyrics in the production process here because people wanted the ideas softened and the message made more humane, more human, more continuous with contemporary monotheism.
O Lord, hear the cries of Ishmael. Rebellious house of Israel. From the hour the Tower of Babel fell to the bomb blast in the King David Hotel. Our Goel is Kiddush Yisrael. In the wilderness the angel named me Ishmael, the forgotten son of man, cast out to crawl away. In the wilderness the angel named me Ishmael.
I sense Joshua is pushing away from a humanized God altogether, though for different reasons than Spinoza did. The inhumanity of God opens up a space to explore a tremendous, terrifying mystery. Any person with an ounce of sense has to be hostile to the divine violence, the doling out of what are, in human terms, patent injustices. And yet for Joshua ben Joseph, there's an equally strong urge to understand the madness which can never be understood. This is the great paradox of the ongoing Jewish struggle with God. It's a creative paradox. It licenses a nameless yearning which is certainly related to love and loss and exile from God. Even that sounds too pop theological. This seems to me something more primal, something I also hear in a very different way in the shorter works of Ernest Bloch. It's a painful tension, of course, full of sorrow and anger, but also joy and hope, and it cuts through every bar of these songs.
Born into the wilderness, out of slavery, we were drowning in the desert, dreaming of the sea. Drowning in the desert, dreaming of the sea. Singing the song of the sea. Sister, set your brothers free.
The singer is obviously and agonizingly aware of the irrationality of tribal loyalty, the irrationality of the one-sided covenant, the madness of history and its wreckage. But he's equally aware that the irrationality of something sacred does not diminish its power. Quite the contrary.
But Lord, all we are is war. Every fruit, fish and flower, every bird, every beast must be mourned for. We are the wilderness. We are ghosts of the shore. We are shades of the ancient Near East.
I said earlier that JBJ's kind of Judaism isn't proto-Christian, and although the songs examine the roots of the prophetic tradition, I don't think they'd be very welcome in most synagogues. But it's not secular Judaism either, it's more like, I think I'd call it feral Judaism, transplanted straight out of the Bronze Age into today's mad cities and overloaded circuits of exchange, with a message about as welcome as Elijah in Ahab's palace. Sacred, hostile to piety, ragged with rage at times, full of love and conviction, probably unreformable. And to my ears, all the better for that.